What do you do when you can see the danger coming, but the one you love can't see it at all? Essence Audio presents A Mother Knows. This story follows Elena Vargas, a mother who raised her son Mateo with warmth and love. Now that Mateo is 27 and carving out his own life, Elena expects him to make mistakes, but not to fall headfirst into the arms of a woman as dangerous and manipulative as Brielle. The moment I opened the door, before I even saw her face fully, something in my stomach tightened, the way it only does when a mother's intuition jumps ahead of the facts. There was my son, Mateo, 26 years old, grown, proud, handsome in his dark jeans and pressed shirt, smiling like he had just won the lottery. And beside him stood a woman whose presence instantly filled my doorway. She looked vaguely familiar. I'd occasionally seen her while shopping in our little town. But in person, she was strikingly beautiful, the kind of beauty that made you look twice. Long, caramel-toned legs, smooth and glossy, led into a little red dress that clung to her body so deliberately it looked like it took an hour to squeeze herself into it. The neckline dipped lower than anything I'd ever worn in my life, even in my 20s, and the hem rode up her thigh every time she shifted her weight, as if the fabric was fighting to stay decent. Her hair fell in perfectly styled waves that bounced when she moved, and her makeup was the kind used in club bathrooms and celebrity videos. Flawless, sculpted, photo-ready. Her perfume rolled into my home like a thick cloud, sweet and heavy, the kind meant to make men lean in and breathe deeper. This was a woman who understood the power of presentation and wasn't afraid to use it confidently. Mateo's eyes were bright and boyish, the same expression he had when he was 7, and showed me his first A-plus paper. "Mom," he said, voice filled with excitement he didn't even try to hide. "This is Brielle. I really wanted you to meet her." Brielle smiled at me, the corners of her mouth lifted upward, but her eyes stayed cool, clicking over me in one sweeping glance that felt more like an appraisal. She extended a manicured hand with long, pointed acrylic nails, painted a glittering silver that caught the light like tiny knives. "Hi, Miss Reyes," she said in a syrupy voice that didn't match the sharpness in her eyes. "It's so nice to finally meet you. Mateo talks about you nonstop." The way she said it wasn't warm. It wasn't affectionate. It carried the faintest note of annoyance, as if my existence was an obstacle to her plans. I welcomed them inside out of politeness, watching Mateo beam and guide her gently past me, as though introducing her to the woman who raised him was some ceremonial milestone he had been waiting for. I noticed immediately how Brielle's gaze swept over my living room, my photos of Mateo through the years, the crocheted blanket my mother made before she passed, the framed drawing Mateo made in 2nd grade of us holding hands. She took it all in with a faint smirk, as if she were flipping through an outdated furniture catalog. Her dress rode even higher as she sat on the couch, crossing her legs in a way designed to draw attention. Mateo's eyes dropped, and I felt my heart sink. Not because of her dress. He's an adult, and adults have adult desires. But because I could see clearly that she knew the effect she had on him, and she was using it deliberately. She talked about herself immediately, her goals, her future, her plans, but every sentence was vague, floating, without substance. She said she wanted to get into real estate, but didn't have time for classes because she had a lot going on. She mentioned 3 different jobs, but couldn't clearly explain any of them in detail. She said she had a huge following on social media and that posting is like a full-time job, adjusting her hair every few seconds to make sure it stayed in place. She said she made most of her money on OnlyFans, but it's weird because that's not a company I ever heard of. When I asked what OnlyFans does, she just smirked and turned her attention to Mateo. But even that didn't feel right. She rarely looked at him when she spoke. She looked at herself, reflections in picture frames, the camera of her phone, her own nails as she admired them. What struck me more deeply than anything she said was the way she held Mateo's arm. Not gently, not lovingly, not with admiration, but with possession, as if touching him made him hers, as if she were silently informing me that whatever role I used to have in his life was now subject to her approval. I've seen women like her before, women who lead men by desire rather than partnership, women who hide their intentions behind beauty, women who keep secrets like currency. While I set food on the table, I caught glimpses of her phone lighting up repeatedly with notifications. Each time, she angled the screen away from me, not away from Mateo, just from me, and her lips curled into the faintest smirk. A smirk meant for someone else entirely. She excused herself to take a work call, but her voice in the hallway was soft, flirty, the kind of tone reserved for someone she wanted to impress, not someone she worked for. Mateo didn't question a thing. His gaze followed her like a man hypnotized. He wasn't stupid. My son is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. But he was intoxicated. Desire will do that, especially when the woman standing in front of you looks like she stepped off the cover of a music video. When she returned, she adjusted her dress again, tugging it down in a performance of modesty that fooled neither of us. "That was my boss," she lied casually, pouring honey into her voice. "He just needed something." Mateo nodded and smiled, believing her instantly. She winked at him, and he blushed. I pressed my lips together, not out of jealousy, not out of bitterness, but out of the quiet ache only mothers know. The ache of watching your grown child walk straight toward a fire you can already feel burning. I watched her closely as she leaned into him, touching his chest, tracing her fingers along his arm, claiming pieces of him as if she were staking borders in my living room. She asked him about his day, but never listened to the answer. She complimented him, but only to make him look at her. She flirted with him, but without warmth, just strategy. She even called him baby twice in front of me, testing my reaction, watching closely. I gave her none. I have lived long enough, survived enough, raised a good man with my own 2 hands. I do not lose my composure in my own home. But I noticed everything. The way her eyes sharpened when Mateo praised me. The way she rolled her tongue across her teeth when I mentioned family dinner nights. The way she laughed too loudly at nothing. The way she clung to him when she felt my intuition studying her. I saw all of it, and even as I sat across from them, smiling, passing plates, hosting, letting my son live his moment of infatuation, I feared I understood something he was still blind to. This woman was not here for love. She was here for attention, control, validation. Whatever benefit she could gain from being adored by a good-hearted man who didn't yet realize his worth. He was an adult. She was an adult. I was an adult, so I said nothing as we all played our roles. But beneath the politeness was a quiet storm gathering. And as I watched Brielle's fingers trail up Mateo's thigh like she owned every inch of him, I knew this season in my son's life was not going to end easily. She wasn't just a bad match. She was a living red flag, wrapped in beauty he wasn't strong enough to look past yet. But he would. He would, because heartbreak teaches where warnings can't. And when that heartbreak came, I already knew who would pick up the pieces. Long before Brielle ever knocked on my door, long before my son stood in front of me as a grown man, wearing cologne and smoothing his shirt like he wanted my approval, Mateo had been the kind of boy mothers dream of raising. He came into this world with a softness most boys try to shake off, and instead of toughening him, life only seemed to deepen it. Even as a baby, he liked to tuck his face into the crook of my neck, fingers curled in my shirt, breathing slow and steady, like he already trusted me with everything he was. I used to stand in the kitchen at 3 a.m, swaying side to side, humming whatever came to mind, and he would cling to me as if I were the only safe place in the universe. As a child, he loved too openly. He hugged too freely. He cried when other kids got hurt. When he was 4, he tried to give away his favorite toy truck because another little boy in the park looked lonely. When he was 7, he brought home a stray kitten even though we could barely afford groceries that week. He held it against his chest and insisted, "She's scared, Mom. We have to help her." I ended up feeding that kitten scrambled eggs and naming her Luna because my son's heart was too big to let anything suffer alone. He was the kind of boy who noticed feelings before he noticed facts. If I came home from my double shift exhausted, he would touch my face with 2 small hands and whisper, "It's okay, Mom. I'm here." He didn't know what bills were, or what exhaustion meant, or how heavy life can sit on a woman's shoulders, but he knew when I needed gentleness, and he always gave it without being asked. In school, he was the boy the teachers adored, always helpful, always patient, always willing to sit next to the kid nobody wanted to partner with. Girls liked him too, not because he was the loudest or funniest, but because he listened, really listened. Even in middle school, when most boys talk over everyone, Mateo leaned in and heard every word as if it mattered. I would watch him sometimes through the classroom door when I came early to pick him up, and there he was, smiling softly, nodding thoughtfully, carrying emotional weight with a maturity beyond his years. He was gentle, loyal, a protector without being possessive, a lover without being reckless. And as he grew older, those traits didn't fade, they deepened. When high school heartbreak came, it broke him in slow, quiet ways. His first girlfriend cheated on him with an older boy from her church group, and Mateo never raised his voice, never cursed her name, never said a bad word. He just sat beside me on the couch, 17 years old, and learning his first adult pain, and whispered, "I thought she was good, Mom. I thought if I loved her enough, she'd stay honest." I remember stroking his hair that night, kissing the top of his head like I had when he was 5, and telling him, "Some people love the attention more than the commitment. Your heart is big, mijo. Not everyone knows how to hold something that precious." And then college came. Jobs came. Responsibilities came. But Mateo's softness never hardened. It only shifted. He became thoughtful in a new, grown man way, refilling my gas tank without telling me, fixing things around the house, cooking me dinner on my birthday because he would say, "You deserve a night off." When he got his first apartment, he invited me over for dinner and made spaghetti so terrible I had to swallow each bite with water. But when he looked at me with pride, I ate every single spoonful. Through everything, one truth stayed constant. My son loved with his whole heart. Always had, always would. But heart-led men are the easiest for the wrong women to manipulate. They mistake attention for affection. They confuse desire for devotion. They overlook lies because they want so badly to believe they found someone who sees them fully. And Mateo, my sweet, trusting, beautiful-hearted son, had inherited that from me. I fell too hard when I was young. I believed too easily. His father taught me the hard way that charm can be a weapon, that beauty can blind, that not every woman or man who leans in with a smile comes carrying love. So as I watched Brielle in my living room that night, laughing too loudly, lying without blinking, clutching Mateo like a prize, I didn't just see a red flag of a girlfriend. I saw the echo of every lesson I ever learned the painful way. I saw a trap lined with seduction and chaos. I saw a woman who would teach my son a heartbreak he didn't deserve. And I saw the boy he had been, the one who hugged stray kittens, soothed my exhaustion, and believed in the good in everyone, still living inside the man standing beside her. He thought he was choosing love. He was choosing danger. And he didn't know it yet. But I did. Mothers always do. One thing was becoming painfully clear. This wasn't just a new chapter in Mateo's life. It was a test. For him. For me. For the bond we built out of late nights, laughter, tears, and unconditional love. And heartbreakingly, it would be a test he would have to fail before he ever understood that his mother had seen the truth from the very first second. 2 days later, I decided to stop by Mateo's apartment with a pot of homemade sopa and a small loaf of pan dulce I had baked that morning. It was the kind of quiet gesture he'd always appreciated, even as an adult. Since childhood, food had been our language: comfort, apology, celebration, encouragement, rolled into flavor and warmth. I didn't text ahead because Mateo had given me a key years before, insisting that a mother should always be able to enter if she needed to. I rarely used it, but that day I felt a tug in my chest, the kind that made me check in on him even if nothing was technically wrong. I knocked first out of courtesy, but when no one answered after the second try, I eased the door open with the key, calling his name softly as I stepped inside. The moment I closed the door behind me, I heard a woman's voice in the living room, low, flirtatious, conspiratorial, and every instinct in me went rigid. Brielle was pacing in tiny circles, one hand pressed to her hip, the other holding a phone to her ear. She wore a cropped tank top so tight it looked painted onto her body, and shorts so small I wasn't sure they qualified as clothing. Her posture was relaxed, and her hair perfect, like she belonged in a club at midnight, not in my son's apartment on a quiet afternoon. She didn't see me enter at first, too wrapped up in her call, and her voice slid through the air in that soft, seductive way women use only when they're trying to tempt someone. "No, babe, relax," she murmured. "He has no idea. Honestly, he's sweet, but he's like a puppy. If he had a tail, it would wag every time I walked into the room." I froze, the words hitting with the sharpness of cold water. She laughed softly into the phone, the kind of intimate little sound that should have belonged to Mateo, but clearly didn't. "Tonight, yes. I'll leave before he gets back. He's been texting me like crazy. It's cute, but too much. He'd follow me around like a lost dog if I let him." She turned then and finally saw me. For a split second, her face emptied of color, pure guilt exposed before she hid it behind a bright, oversized smile. "Oh, Miss Reyes, I didn't hear you come in," she said, fumbling to end the call. But not before I saw the name on the screen. Derek, with a heart and a flame. She tossed her hair and forced another smile. Just talking to my cousin. She lied, too quickly and too sweetly. I didn't respond. I set the pot of soup on the counter without breaking eye contact. She walked toward me, tugging at her shorts as though suddenly aware of how exposed she was. Mateo ran out to get us smoothies, she said lightly. He'll be right back. I simply nodded. The calm in my voice surprised even me. I'm sure he will. She studied me with an expression that flitted between annoyance, insecurity, and calculation. I know we got off on the wrong foot, she said, dropping the fake sweetness. But maybe you misunderstand me. I didn't move. I understand enough. Her jaw tightened just for a moment before her mask slipped again. If you think you heard something, it's probably not what you think, she said. Mateo loves you, but he's an adult. He doesn't need you trying to control his relationships. I kept my voice soft. I don't control anything. I just pay attention. She stepped closer, lowering her voice into a hiss. If you tell him anything, he won't believe you. He barely knows you don't like me already. And if you stir things up, he'll take my side. You know that, right? Before I could respond, the front door opened. Mateo walked in smiling, holding 2 smoothies, his whole face lighting up when he saw me. Mom, what are you doing here? He asked, delighted. You didn't tell me you were coming? Brielle immediately draped herself over him, kissing his cheek with exaggerated sweetness. Your mom brought food, she announced brightly. Isn't that adorable? Adorable. Cute. Words meant to dismiss and belittle. I watched Mateo melt under her affection, completely unaware of the poisonous undertone I had just witnessed. He hugged me warmly, the same kind of hug he'd given me since he was small, sincere, and unguarded. Stay for a while, Mom. We were just hanging out. I studied him, this soft-hearted, loving man who still hugged me like I was home, who used to run into my arms after school, who once cried in my lap after his first heartbreak, who still looked for grounding even when he didn't realize he was doing it. And here he was, wrapped up in a woman who was lying to him without hesitation. I stayed a bit, making small talk while Brielle clung to him unnaturally, laughing too loudly, constantly touching him, constantly performing affection. Every time her phone buzzed, she flipped it over quickly and her smile froze just a little too long. When I finally stood to leave, Mateo walked me to the door. Mom, he said gently, I know you're unsure about her, but she's trying. Give her a little space to show you who she really is. I cupped his cheek the way mothers do long after their children think they've outgrown it. I always give people space to show me who they are, I said. Some fill it with truth, others don't. He frowned a little, confused but wanting to bridge the gap. She makes me happy, Mom. I just want you to see that. I didn't argue. I didn't warn him. I didn't tell him what I heard. I only nodded. I hope she does. He hugged me tighter this time, and I held him. Not because I doubted him, but because I knew he was stepping into something he didn't yet have the experience to recognize. As I walked down the hallway, the situation pressed heavily in my chest. Something was breaking. Something was already broken. And Mateo had no idea. The following week unfolded in that uneasy way life does when a mother senses trouble but knows pushing too hard will only drive her child deeper into danger. Mateo called me every other day, cheerful and distracted, updating me on work, friends, weekend plans with Brielle, none of which eased the knot in my stomach. Every time he spoke about her, he sounded proud, almost flattered that a woman like her wanted him. And that part, I understood. Brielle was beautiful the way a flame is beautiful. Bright, hypnotic, and capable of burning everything it touched. Men like Mateo, kind, loyal, affectionate, were always the ones most eager to prove they could withstand the heat. I didn't tell him what I'd overheard, not yet. I wanted proof, something undeniable, something he couldn't wave away as a misunderstanding. So I watched quietly from a distance, listening for changes in his tone, in his habits, in the rhythm of his life. And soon enough, the cracks began to show. One evening, Mateo called to say Brielle had forgotten her wallet at home and needed him to drive across town to bring it to her. She gets embarrassed when she forgets things, he said, defending her before I even responded. She just needs support, Mom. I said nothing, but an uneasy feeling crawled beneath my skin. 2 nights later, he mentioned she'd canceled plans last minute, saying she was exhausted, but I heard the way he tried to disguise the disappointment. A few days after that, he told me Brielle had started locking her phone when she was around him, claiming she needed privacy. The signs were there. He just didn't know how to read them yet, and then came the moment that shifted everything. On a Saturday afternoon, while I was repotting plants on my balcony, I saw Mateo's name flash across my phone. His voice was rushed, breathless, unusually shaken. "Mom," he said, "do you have a minute? Can I come over?" I felt my heartbeat tighten. "Of course," I answered. "I'm home." 20 minutes later, he arrived wearing the defeated look only heartbreak or humiliation could carve into someone's face. He sank into my couch, staring at his hands for a long moment before he spoke. "I think Brielle lied to me," he said quietly. "About something small, maybe nothing." But even he didn't believe that. I didn't push. I just sat beside him, waiting. When people are hurting, silence is often the only safe place they have to land. Eventually, he explained that Brielle had claimed she was spending the evening with her cousin, but Mateo had passed by a restaurant on his way home and seen her inside, dressed to the nines, laughing with a man whose arm was around her chair. "I didn't go inside," he said. "I didn't want to make a scene, but when I asked her about it later, she said I must have mistaken someone else for her. She swore she was home all night." My chest tightened. The lie wasn't the problem. It was how easily she expected him to swallow it. "You don't think you were mistaken?" I said softly. Mateo shook his head. "Not for a second." He reached up and rubbed the back of his neck the way he did when he felt foolish. "I just don't understand why someone would say they care about you, but still do things that hurt." He didn't realize how familiar that sentence sounded coming from him. He had said it before, years ago, when he was 17 and heartbroken for the first time. Back then, he'd believed the world ended every time a girl disappointed him. Now, he believed he was the problem. Too trusting, too hopeful, too good. "Sometimes," I said gently, "people love the attention more than they love the person giving it." He swallowed hard, letting that settle. I didn't mention the phone call I'd overheard, or the names I had seen, or the way Brielle had tried to threaten me with Mateo's loyalty. I wanted him to trust his own conclusions. Mothers can guide, but they shouldn't hold the steering wheel of an adult child's life. He stayed a while, long enough for me to make tea and heat up leftovers. He leaned his head on the back of the couch, eyes closed, like he was trying to untangle knots inside himself. "I want to believe her," he said finally, "but something feels off." That was the moment I knew. Mateo wasn't blind. He was hopeful, and hope can be louder than truth until the truth grows some teeth. 2 days later, the situation escalated in a way neither of us could ignore. I was leaving the grocery store when I saw Brielle outside on her phone, pacing aggressively, arguing with someone. Her makeup looked smudged, her outfit even more revealing than usual. Tight dress, plunging neckline, heels too tall for mid-afternoon. Her voice dripped venom. "I told you I'm handling it," she snapped. "He's useful. Don't screw this up." Her eyes lifted and met mine. In that instant, she scrambled to soften her expression, waving awkwardly as if we were friends bumping into each other. I didn't wave back. I didn't even change my stride. I walked past her with a calm that must have unsettled her, because she muttered something under her breath and turned away sharply. Something inside me settled then. Not anger, not fear, but clarity. Seeing her outside of Mateo's orbit made it unmistakable. She wasn't a lost young woman trying to find herself. She wasn't confused or insecure. She was a manipulator, a performer, someone who knew exactly how to use Mateo's goodness against him. And Mateo, bless his soft heart, was too loyal to imagine someone like her existed. That evening, he called again. "Mom," he said, breath shaky. "Can I ask you something without you getting mad?" My heart clenched. "Always." He exhaled slowly. "If you saw something I needed to know, something important, would you tell me?" I closed my eyes and let the truth I'd been carrying settle into my voice. "Yes," I said. "If I knew you were in danger, emotionally or otherwise, I would tell you. But I would never tell you who to love. That choice is yours." He didn't speak for a long time. I heard him swallow, heard the moment he gathered courage. "Can I come over tomorrow? I think I need to talk through something." And that was when I knew. Something was shifting, slowly, painfully, but in the right direction. Mateo wasn't ready to see the whole truth yet, but he was starting to see the edges. He was starting to notice the darkness where love should have been. And when a good man starts noticing shadows, the light isn't far behind. I just had to stand still long enough for him to walk toward it on his own. Mateo arrived at my house just after sunset, shoulders tense, jaw tight, the kind of exhausted that doesn't come from work, but from holding in too many emotions for too long. He didn't knock. He used his key, something he hadn't done in months. And when he stepped inside, he looked younger in the worst way. Not youthful, but vulnerable. Like life had knocked him backward into an old fear he thought he'd outgrown. I was at the stove, warming a small pot of arroz con leche, and the moment he saw me, he exhaled in a way that sounded almost like relief. He didn't say hello. He just sat at the kitchen table with a heaviness that made me turn the flame down and sit across from him without asking a single question. He rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand. "Mom, something's off." His voice was unsteady, as if he didn't trust his own words yet. He tried to explain, stumbling over sentences, starting stories in the middle, trying to piece together the gut feeling he had been avoiding for weeks. He talked about the man at the restaurant, the canceled plans, the locked phone, the stories that didn't match. His eyes filled with frustration, not anger at Brielle, but anger at himself for pretending everything was fine. He said he wanted love to work so badly that he ignored the alarms ringing inside him. I didn't lean in, didn't prompt, didn't offer judgment. I just listened, letting him spill every tangled strand of confusion onto the table between us. And he did. He told me how Brielle would flirt with waiters and then blame him for being insecure. How she'd roll her eyes when he wanted to spend time with his friends. How she posted provocative photos online but accused him of being controlling if he expressed discomfort. How she kept comparing him to real men who knew how to handle a woman like her. He said he wasn't sure when the relationship stopped being exciting and started feeling like walking on glass. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He froze. Another buzz, then another. I watched as Brielle's name lit up the screen over and over. First with messages, then calls, then voice notes. Mateo didn't pick up. He didn't even move. But I could see the tension in his jaw, the nervousness in his fingers, the reflex to appease her. When he didn't answer, her tone shifted. The messages stacked quickly, the transformation horrifyingly fast. One moment she was begging him to talk, and the next she was accusing him of abandoning her. Then she started attacking his masculinity with deliberate cruelty, asking if he was a real man or just a little boy who runs to mommy every time life gets hard. Mateo flinched like she had slapped him through the screen. He turned his face away, embarrassed, but I wasn't judging him. I knew that shame. Everyone has loved someone who made them question themselves. It's a universal ache. When the insults didn't hook him, the tone changed again. His screen lit with messages that were explicit, seductive, calculated. She sent naked photos, revealing ones, and voice notes dripping with sex, promising to do that thing he liked last time, whispering things meant to fog his judgment and pull him back by the weakest part of himself. It wasn't affection, it was strategy. He stared at the table, jaw clenched. "She always does this," he whispered. "Every time I get upset, she uses sex to shut me up." In that moment, it finally reached him, not through my words, but through hers. Brielle wasn't confusing. She was predictable. Her care wasn't real. Her sweetness wasn't real. Her apologies weren't real. They were tools she pulled out whenever she felt him slipping out of her control. Mateo slowly reached for his phone, looked at it for a long moment, and then, hands trembling, he pressed the button to silence all notifications. He placed it face down on the table, exhaled shakily, and leaned back in his chair as if he had just put down a heavy weight. That was his turning point. Not anger, not a dramatic revelation, just a tired man finally choosing peace over chaos, even if he didn't know what came next. He looked up at me, eyes tired and sad. "Mom, what do I do?" I reached across the table and took his hand, not to tell him what to choose, but to let him feel steady while he found the answer for himself. "You give yourself time," I said softly, "and you let the truth speak louder than the noise." His shoulders dropped a little, the tension easing. For the first time since he walked in, he looked like he could breathe. We didn't fix everything that night, but something important shifted. The fog began to lift, and for the first time, Mateo didn't defend her. He defended himself. The thing is, we both underestimated how far she would go, because it happened faster than either of us expected. Mateo and I were still sitting at the kitchen table, the air between us finally softening after hours of truth-telling, when a pounding hit the front door so violently it rattled the frame. Before I could get up, the door flew open. She must have followed him. Brielle stormed into my house like a gust of wind carrying perfume, anger, and chaos. She didn't knock, didn't pause, didn't even look around to see where she was. She came in ready for war. She wore an inappropriately small leopard print skirt. It was low-cut, short enough to make her tug it down with every step. Her hair was wild, her eyeliner smudged from crying or yelling or both, and her heels clicked across my hallway with the sharpness of a threat. She held her phone in one hand and her pride in the other. "Mateo!" she yelled, voice echoing against my walls. "What the hell is this? You're ignoring me now? You think you can just disappear? Are you serious?" Mateo stood slowly from the table, stunned. "Brielle, you can't just come into my mom's—" "Oh, shut up!" she snapped, turning her fury toward him like a spotlight. "You answer when I call. You don't get to run off and hide with your mommy every time you feel insecure." Then she turned to me, and the little mask she wore before, the fake politeness, the sugary sweetness, was gone entirely. "You," she said, pointing at me like I was an obstacle she planned to destroy. "You've been poisoning him against me since day one. You think you're better than me because you're older? Because you raised him? Please, you're just jealous I have what you don't. I didn't move. I didn't even blink." She mistook my silence for weakness, but time had taught me to be patient. When an enemy is making a mistake, remain silent and let them. She took a step closer. "You're pathetic," she hissed. "Meddling, controlling, lonely. You can't stand that he finally has a real woman who makes him happy." Mateo stepped forward immediately, protective and angry. "Don't talk to her like that." "Oh, look at you," she mocked him, rolling her eyes. "Standing up for mommy. Real men don't need their mom to fight their battles. Real men don't run away from their girlfriends because they can't handle a tough woman." Her voice sharpened with every word. "Are you a man or not? Because, honestly, sometimes I wonder." Mateo went pale, hurt deep under his ribs, and that only made her double down. "And you?" she said, whirling back toward me. "You're a joke. You know nothing about him now. He's mine. I'm the one he sleeps with. I'm the one he wants. You think you're protecting him? Newsflash, sweetheart. He begs for me. He begs for my attention." Her words were poison designed specifically to wound. I could feel Mateo's humiliation, the way his shoulders tightened, the way shame pulled at his posture, but I didn't flinch. "Brielle," I said softly, "you need to leave." That was all it took to tip her into full eruption. "No, he needs to hear the truth," she screamed. She marched up to him and grabbed his chin with her hand, trying to force eye contact. "Tell her you're staying with me tonight. Tell her you're done with this little codependent nonsense. Tell her she doesn't control you." He pulled her hand away. "Don't touch me like that." For the first time, she looked scared, because the thing she relied on most was crumbling. So she changed weapons. She stepped closer, sliding her hand down Mateo's chest, her voice dropping into a sultry whisper. "Baby, come home with me. I'll make it worth it. You know I'm the only one who can make you feel good. You know what I can do to you." She leaned up to his ear. "You loved what I did last time. Don't lie. I know I got a little crazy, but I'll make it up to you." It was nauseating. It was desperate. It was the final nail. Mateo stepped back so abruptly, she nearly fell forward. "That's enough," he said, voice shaking, not from fear, but from finally seeing her clearly. "You don't respect me. You don't respect my mother. You don't respect yourself. I'm done." Her face froze, eyes widening as though she'd been slapped. What? I said I'm done. She scoffed, a cruel, humorless sound. You can't be serious. Mateo straightened his shoulders in a way that reminded me of the little boy who used to defend his friends at school even when he was scared. I'm serious. I want you to leave. Her expression twisted into something ugly, rage mixed with disbelief. You're choosing her over me? A sad old woman over your girlfriend? She's my mother, he snapped, and she never lied to me. Brielle's cheeks flushed deep red. You're making a mistake, she spat. No one will want you after this. Mateo didn't even respond. He simply walked to the door and held it open. The silence between them was sharper than any shouting could have been. Brielle's jaw trembled with fury. Then she grabbed her purse, stomped toward the exit, and before leaving, turned back and delivered her final venomous blow. You'll regret this. Both of you. Then she slammed the door so hard, every picture on the wall rattled. And just like that, the storm was gone. But the damage it left behind was only beginning to surface. The whole house fell into a ringing, vibrating quiet, like the air itself was trying to recover from the force of what had just happened. Mateo didn't move for a moment. He stood there staring at the door, shoulders trembling, chest rising and falling too quickly, like part of him was still bracing for her to burst back in. Only when he finally turned around did I see the pain in his eyes. The adrenaline had drained away, and all that was left was hurt. Not just heartbreak, but humiliation, confusion, and the raw ache of finally recognizing a truth he didn't want to see. He sank down onto the couch slowly, like the weight of everything Brielle had said was pressing him into the cushions. He dropped his face into his hands and let out a sound I hadn't heard from him since he was a teenager. Half groan, half sigh, the sound of someone who tried so hard to be strong and just couldn't hold it in anymore. I moved quietly toward him and sat beside him, not touching him at first, because sometimes touch feels like pressure until the heart settles. We sat together in silence, the kind that feels like a soft blanket after a storm, until his breathing finally slowed. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed. I can't believe I let her talk to me like that, he whispered. I can't believe I let her talk to you like that. His voice cracked on the last part, and he shook his head, ashamed. Mom, I'm so sorry. I reached out and placed my hand on the back of his neck. Firm, reassuring, the way I used to when he was a child and the world felt too big. You have nothing to apologize for, I said. You were in love. Or what you hoped was love. Sometimes that hope is louder than the truth. He inhaled shakily, eyes glistening. I should have seen it. I should have known. No, I said gently. Manipulative people don't show their true self all at once. They give you pieces of a person who doesn't exist, and they give it just slowly enough that you don't realize what you're losing along the way. He swallowed hard, staring at the floor. She made me feel wrong all the time, like I had to earn being treated well, and if I didn't earn it perfectly, I didn't deserve it. He let out a hollow laugh. She made me feel like a child. I placed my hand over his. Love doesn't shrink you, Mateo. It doesn't take pieces away. Real love makes you feel more like yourself, not less. He looked at me with eyes that suddenly made him look 20 again, full of pain, but also full of trust. Mom, do you think she ever loved me? I took a breath because that question deserved honesty, not comfort. I moved closer so he could hear me without flinching. I think she loved being adored, I said softly. I think she loved the attention. I think she loved what you gave her. Your time, your heart, your steadiness. But I don't think she ever loved you the way you deserve to be loved. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. He blinked hard. I feel so stupid. Don't you ever say that, I told him, my voice firm for the first time that night. Kindness isn't stupidity. Believing the best in someone isn't stupidity. Wanting connection isn't stupidity. You gave someone the chance to love you. That's brave. And someday, someone worthy will take that chance and hold it carefully. He looked away quickly, wiping another tear, embarrassed by the emotion. I reached out and gently guided his face back toward me, the way I did when he was small and hiding hurt behind stubborn silence. Hey, I murmured. You're still my son. Even grown men get to fall apart sometimes. He let out a shaky laugh, the first real one of the night. I didn't think it would hurt this much. Hurt means you cared, I said. Healing means you learned, and you're learning now. He leaned into me then, not as a child, not as a helpless man, but as someone who finally felt safe enough not to pretend. His head rested against my shoulder, heavy and warm, and I wrapped my arm around him, holding him exactly the way I did when he was young. Steady, strong, without asking him to be anything other than human. We stayed like that for a long time, the room quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the fading echo of everything that had been said. Eventually, he whispered, "Thank you for not saying, 'I told you so.'" I smiled into his hair. That's not what mothers are for. We're not here to win. We're here to catch you when the fall comes. We're here to remind you who you are. He nodded against me, and I felt something in him settle. Some final knot loosening after weeks of tension. For the first time in a long while, he felt like himself again. And as I held him, I realized this was the moment we had been moving toward all along. The moment he reclaimed his worth, and I got back the son I raised before the wrong woman convinced him he had to shrink his heart to fit inside hers. Tonight, he wasn't broken. He was beginning again. The week that followed was quieter than I expected. Not empty or sad. Just still, the kind of stillness that finally lets a wound breathe. Mateo didn't rush to fill the space Brielle left behind. He didn't rebound, didn't go out drinking with friends to forget, didn't pretend he was fine. He showed up at my house almost every day after work, not because he needed fixing anymore, but because he needed a soft place to land while he figured out who he was without her. We cooked dinner together, watched old movies, shared small memories that reminded both of us how much life existed outside of the chaos Brielle brought with her. Every day, I saw more of him returning. His laugh came back first, a real one, not the strained chuckle he had been offering the world for months. Then came his appetite, the jokes he used to make, the small joy in retelling something funny that happened at work. Healing doesn't arrive in a straight line. It comes back in pieces, and Mateo, slowly but surely, was collecting those pieces again. But even as he began to feel lighter, I could tell there was still a lingering ache inside him, the part that wondered why he wasn't enough to make a woman love him properly. That ache is common in men, though they rarely admit it. They want to be chosen, admired, desired. When manipulation imitates love, it confuses the mind and bruises the heart. One evening, about a week after the confrontation, he came over with takeout from our favorite little empanada place. We ate together at the table, and halfway through the meal, he paused, pushing his food aside. "Mom," he said, his voice soft but clearer than before. "Do you think I fall too fast?" I wiped my hands on a napkin and sat back. "I think you love with your whole heart," I answered. "And that's not something to be embarrassed about. It's something rare." He nodded slowly, absorbing that, then sighed. I don't want this to make me guarded. I don't want to change who I am." "You won't," I told him. "Not if you heal honestly. Boundaries aren't walls. And choosing better next time doesn't mean closing your heart. It means protecting it." He smiled faintly. I liked the sound of that. It was only then that he admitted he'd been tempted to call Brielle once or twice in moments of loneliness. Not because he wanted her back, but because habits are hard to break. "I didn't," he added quickly. "I knew it wouldn't go anywhere good. But I thought about it." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Thinking about it doesn't make you weak. Acting on it would have, and you didn't." That small truth settled something inside him. His shoulders relaxed, his breath deepened. He was forgiving himself without even realizing it. The next day, something unexpected happened. Mateo came to pick me up after a doctor's appointment, and when we walked into the lobby together, the receptionist, a woman about his age, gave him a long, appreciative glance. It wasn't subtle. Mateo didn't even notice. He was too busy helping me with my coat. But I noticed, and so did she. There was something healing in that moment. Not romantic, not hopeful, just a gentle reminder that other people saw his worth even while he doubted it. Later that night, we sat on my couch with cups of tea, and he stared into the steam rising from his mug. "I feel stupid for letting her get to me so deeply," he admitted. "It's like she reached inside me and twisted everything around." "She did," I said. "Manipulators go for the softest parts, the parts you're proud of, your loyalty, your generosity, your tenderness. She twisted them to benefit herself. That doesn't make you weak. It makes her cruel." He took a long breath. "I don't ever want to go back to someone like that." "You won't," I said with certainty, "because now you know the signs. And now you trust yourself enough to walk away when something feels wrong." He leaned his head back against the couch, eyes closing. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think I do." A few days later, he made a decision that surprised both of us. "Mom," he said, knocking on my door early one morning. "I'm blocking her number." He held up his phone as if seeking confirmation that it was the right thing. I nodded. "It's time." He pressed the button, and just like that, a chapter ended. Not with a dramatic goodbye, but with quiet, firm closure. As the days continued, something even more beautiful began happening. Our relationship deepened again. Not in a childlike way, but in an adult-to-adult, mutual respect way. We cooked together, talked about life, shared stories of our own mistakes, and laughed more easily than either of us had in months. It reminded me that motherhood doesn't end when your child becomes an adult. It simply changes shape. One evening, after helping me fix a loose cabinet hinge, Mateo stood in the doorway with his jacket over his shoulder. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for everything. I didn't realize how much I needed you." I stepped forward and straightened his collar like I used to when he was small. "You don't need to realize it," I said. "Just remember it when life gets loud." He kissed my forehead, a gesture he hadn't done in years, and walked out into the evening with shoulders that finally looked unburdened. For the first time in a long time, I watched him go without worry pulling at me. He wasn't broken anymore. He wasn't confused or ashamed or lost. He was growing again. He was learning again. He was becoming the man I knew he could be, self-aware and confident in his own worth. And I realized something too. No matter how old he gets, no matter where his life leads him, no matter who enters or leaves his world, he will always be my child. And I will always be his quiet place, his safety, the person who sees him clearly, even when he can't see himself. Because that's what mothers do. We love them when they soar. We love them when they fall. And we love them through every broken piece until they remember how to put themselves back together again. The house was quiet that evening. The kind of soft, comforting quiet that only settles in after a storm finally runs out of thunder. I stood at the sink, rinsing the last teacup from Mateo's visit, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the gentle flutter of the curtains as the night breeze slipped through the cracked window. The whole house felt lighter, as if it had been holding its breath right alongside us these past few weeks. I dried my hands, looked into the warm living room, and let myself breathe in the peace that had finally returned. On the end table was a small framed picture of Mateo when he was 6, gap-toothed and beaming beside a crooked finger painting he'd brought home from school. That little boy was still inside him, hopeful and tender-hearted, giving love easily and meaning every bit of it. The world had shaken him, but it hadn't taken that goodness away. It never would. I walked over and sat on the couch where he had cried days earlier, releasing everything he had been holding in. There was still a faint dip in the cushion where he'd leaned. I rested my hand there, feeling the echo of that moment. No bitterness remained toward Brielle, not even anger. Just gratitude that life had exposed her before she caused permanent harm, and that Mateo trusted me enough to fall apart in my arms and let me help put him back together. Through the window, the streetlights cast soft amber halos over the pavement. Somewhere in the hallway, the clock ticked in its steady rhythm, marking time's refusal to pause for anyone. And for the first time in a long while, I felt ready for what came next. Mateo was healing, growing, finding himself again, and I was steady, right where I needed to be. I closed my eyes and let the quiet truth settle in my chest. He was a grown man, but he would always be my baby. And I would always be the place he could come home to when the world bruised him too deeply. I stood, walked into the kitchen, and smiled to myself as I wiped down the counter. Mateo had terrible taste in women. That much was obvious now. He always went for the flash, the fire, the drama. Meanwhile, he never even noticed sweet Jessica from church, even though she asked about him every single Sunday, could bake bread from scratch, and remembered people's birthdays without checking Facebook. I shook my head with a quiet laugh. One day, I thought, I'm going to march him right into the fellowship hall and reintroduce him to that girl. And maybe this time, he'd actually keep his eyes open long enough to notice her. Because Lord knows, after Brielle, he could use a nice woman with a good heart and 2 functioning brain cells to rub together. A Mother Knows by Essence Audio. You made it with me all the way to the end tonight. And before you go, I want to leave you with something soft. What you just heard wasn't just a story about a breakup or a toxic relationship. It was a reminder of how powerful a mother's love truly is. You can raise strong children. You can guide them, teach them, and protect them. But life will still send them into storms you can't prevent. Sometimes, all you can do is stay steady and trust they'll find their way back to the light. And when they finally do, when they see what you saw from the beginning, that's one of the quietest and most sacred victories a person can have.